Hello, everyone, and very good day to all of you. And this is Vinod Kothari from Vinod Kothari Consultants. I'm recording this short video to talk about my thoughts about the purpose and effect test for related party transactions. As everyone who is concerned with the topic is aware, that from 1st April 2023, the definition of related party transactions is getting amended so as to include transactions with unrelated parties if the purpose and effect of the transaction is to benefit a related party. Now, we ran recently a long workshop, roughly about 3 hours workshop with participation by more than 60 very senior professionals. We've also uploaded the PPT used in the workshop. We have also uploaded a detailed list of questions which we thought would be relevant FAQs on the purpose and effect test. All of that is already a part of our website. And the purpose of this short video is to give a brief introduction to the subject, the main issues which I think would be of relevance to all professionals. This is intended for corporate professionals. It's intended for audit committee members and independent directors, as it talks about the responsibility of audit committees, particularly independent directors, on the new dimension to the related party transaction paradigm. So let's get started quickly. First of all, the change takes place on 1st April 2023. Is it at all adding a new dimension to the way we look at RPTs? Or is it simply making small tweaking changes in the RPT policy, uploading in the website? Business goes as usual, and we just have expanded the definition of RPTs to include the so-called purpose and effect test. If one takes that view that it's just nothing but a perfunctory change in RPT policy, then I think we are undermining the complete intent of RPT controls, and that goes deep into the very purpose of corporate governance. I'll talk about that, of course. That's part one. And number two, we are being extremely short-sighted as we are not taking note of the way prosecutions about related party transactions elsewhere in the world. I've seen several SEC prosecutions in the US as well, which have held responsible not just auditors, but in many cases audit committee members also for breaches of RPT controls. Now, as we all understand, RPT, related party transaction, there's nothing wrong in RPTs. There's nothing wrong. RPT is not a crime. RPTs are the way of life. That's how companies work. So RPTs, there's absolutely nothing wrong. However, if someone tries to structure transactions or someone tries to structure relationships so as to escape two things, number one, the disclosure, number two, the regulatory approvals required for RPTs, the intent basically seems to dodge the regulation. Why would somebody be wanting to dodge regulation if all is well with RPTs? If RPTs have nothing wrong, why at all would anyone want to dodge regulation? So the very fact that somebody is trying actively to conceal a transaction, hide it behind the guard of either interposed unrelated parties so as to make the related party ultimately benefiting from the transaction invisible, or try to structure a relationship so as to escape the definition of RPTs, there is some mischief working behind it. So the whole idea of the extended definition is to nab or catch the mischief. Now, mischief is not to be caught only from 1st April to 2023. It would be counterintuitive. It would be completely ridiculous to say that all along the mischief was still fine. Suddenly come 1st April 2023, mischief becomes a mischief. A mischief is a mischief forever. The issue basically is that from 1st April 2023, it's a kind of a wake-up call. It's kind of warning signal from the regulator. Even if in the past you were, let's say, little sanguine, little less, a little careless about RPT controls, from 1st April 2023, I'm not permitting you to relax any further. That would mean from 1st April 2023, I'm going to seriously ask you whether there were transactions which were intended by way of purpose and effect to benefit our related parties, but were structured simply as a camouflage transaction. So the whole stress of the purpose and effect is very clearly it's on attacking a camouflage. Camouflage, that's a very important word. That would mean, and one can get that very easily both by looking at the consultation paper from which this concept of purpose and effect came in. Also, from looking at the UK law, I must stress that the exact language which is used in our RPT definition now, section regulation 21ZC now, exactly in the very same fashion is appearing in UK listing regulations and so-called disclosure and transparency regulations. So this is emanating from the UK, and in UK regulations as well, it's very clearly coming out that the intent of adding the purpose and effect test was to attack an avoidance device. So it's an anti-avoidance provision. That would mean if the camouflage, if the smoke screen, if the facade of bringing an unrelated party or unrelated structure in between was simply to dodge the regulation, that would mean if you remove the camouflage, we remove the smoke screen, one can clearly see a transaction benefiting a related party, then such related party transactions would still be subject matter of both disclosure and the regulation. So that would mean, that leads us to understanding, number one, what's the key meaning of purpose and effect. Purpose and effect, therefore, is one where if the smoke screen or the camouflage was removed, one can clearly and perceptibly see the transaction benefiting a related party. That would mean the transaction was intended to benefit a related party. However, it was structured so as to dodge the regulation. The moment we say transaction was intended to benefit a related party, we also get a sense that these transactions were, in fact, not transactions in ordinary course of business. Transactions in ordinary course of business are not intended to benefit related parties. Transactions in ordinary course of business are intended for commercial benefit of the company. They may be a benefit going to related parties too, which is, as I mentioned, RPT is nothing wrong. RPT may give a benefit to the company. RPT may give a benefit to related parties. RPT may give benefit to any stakeholder for that matter. There's nothing wrong in RPTs. But the moment we say there was someone actively trying to conceal a transaction, put a wall of insulation, put a wall of put a smoke screen in the process, that would mean there is some mischievous mind working so as to escape the regulation. That would mean that there was somebody trying to, there was some engineering working in the process to see that if at all this transaction was brought on the screen, on the surface, it would, there'll be somebody uncomfortable about it. There's somebody uncomfortable, somebody would probably feel uncomfortable in either bringing it into picture, or maybe the perception is that this transaction will not either pass the muster, will not be approved by audit committee, or probably will have serious questions from shareholders. So if at all the intent is to escape the regulation, that would mean the transaction in question is such which is primarily or predominantly intended to benefit a related party. It's normally not a transaction in ordinary course of business. It's a camouflage transaction. We are not talking about an oblique, indirect, or tangent benefit to a related party. We're talking about a direct benefit. Transaction is intending a benefit. Benefit is not incidental. Benefit is not something that comes as a matter of course. Benefit is the primary intent of transaction. That is, benefit of the related party is the primary, predominant. It's not incidental, so-called fall off. It's not a spin-off. That's the very purpose why the transaction was structured. That would therefore normally mean the focus should be on transactions not in the ordinary course of business. So some of the key features of such purpose and effect RPTs, number one, they are usually not transactions in ordinary course of business. These are usually transactions which directly create some benefit to a related party. When I say direct, I would mean the camouflages, the smoke screens, the sort of insulations can be one or more than one. There may be more than wall of insulation. It might be trying to escape the definition by bringing several stopovers in the process. That doesn't make a difference, but one can clearly see a flow of benefit from the company to the related party. The connection, the nexus is clear, immediate. Gaps of time, addition of certain processes or addition of certain benefits in the process, that does not still make a difference. That would mean if the transaction, but for the intent of benefiting related party, wouldn't have existed, I would say such a transaction was intended to benefit a related party. So those are some of the features of transactions which would be hit by the purpose and effect test. And once again cautioning that the very fact that somebody has benefited, that doesn't make a difference. benefit of a related party is not the primary target of the regulation. The intent to pass such benefit, that is intended to pass such benefit. And I'm getting this sense of purpose in effect because this word or similar words have been used in general anti-avoidance regulations in taxation also. The GAR rules also use the word purpose or effect, and where also the interpretation has been that if the sole or dominant intent of a transaction was avoidance, one would then call it a transaction intended for the purpose or effect of a tax avoidance. Getting a similar cue, therefore, if the sole or dominant intent of transaction was to benefit a related party, it wouldn't have existed but for such urge to cause a benefit to related party, the transaction would get hit by the purpose and effect test. Now, question therefore is, well, we are talking about infinite number of transactions done by company with unrelated parties. No one would ever be conceivably be able to test or check the innumerable transactions that happen with unrelated parties. So how is it how is it somebody going to actually implement the change, if at all the change requires some implementation? First question. Number two, who are the primary responsibility or ownership centers? Who are the ones who are supposed to ensure that transactions with unrelated parties are not designed to benefit a related party? Talking about the second thing, that would probably be easier to talk about. Who owns the responsibility? Who is the one who takes the onus if at all transactions structured or engineered to benefit related parties are detected? Who takes the primary onus? Now, I think it's very easy to understand that if something has given an undisclosed benefit to me, something has given a concealed benefit to me, it was in the shadows, it was not on the visible on the surface. I'm the one who's benefited. Under the shadows, I got a benefit. So who was the culprit? Quite easy to understand that if benefit has gone to me and that's gone at the back of all regulatory controls, well, the needle of suspicion is very clearly on me. I am the one who must have engineered such a transaction. So first, ownership responsibility, I would say. First, onus of owning that transactions are not structured to benefit related parties are the related parties themselves. If a transaction is at all detected, that's a very important point to understand. If a transaction is at all detected, which has given some concealed benefit to me, and therefore the needle of suspicion points to me, what's the implication? If at all it's established there indeed was such transaction and I don't have valid defenses, what's the implication? Implication is that I was trying to grab some concealed benefit, mischievously, the deliberate intent. As I said, this is deliberate because it's a conscious design. It's an engineered structure. I was trying to grab a benefit at the back of all regulatory controls, at the back of audit committee, at the back of shareholders, and therefore can I not be charged for a fraud? Is it not a fraudulent, deliberate, mischievous concealment of facts so as to grab a benefit? Unwarranted, unscrupulous benefit to a related party, and that too at the back of all controls. To my mind, very clearly, it borders, can easily fall in the definition of fraud. And if it's established to be a fraud, I don't need to tell you what the consequences will be. So all related parties, first of all, need to stand up and take notice that henceforth, come 1st April, the scene changes. If in the past you thought that you could probably get scot-free by structuring relationship or structuring related parties so as to wriggle out of definition or to interpose intermediaries or stopovers so as to make a transaction invisible to the audit committee, come 1st April 2023, please do understand the watchful eye of the regulation. It's not difficult today to connect the dots and find the real flow of benefits, and therefore neither will SEBI nor the stock exchanges nor regulations are going to let you do that any further. So the first sensitization therefore begins at the RPs themselves. Next, I would say very importantly, very importantly, the auditors and the audit committee. Auditors, why do I say auditors? It's quite easy for auditors to come up with a disclaimer statement saying that I was the honest person, I was the most, tunnel vision person. I was given a list of related parties. I stuck myself to that list. And very often the auditors in extremely well presented presentations to audit committees come with a so-called disclaimer statement that we have checked related parties. We've checked related party transactions on the strength of the list produced by the management. Auditors are transactional. Auditors check transactions. They are transaction auditors. And notice that auditing standards, SA 550 or ISA 550 or similar standards from AICPA or similar standards from PCAOB or similar standards from anywhere in the world, they've always had substantial space dedicated to so-called undisclosed related party transactions. Auditing standards have always talked about that. If you are the one who are getting a sense, getting a signal that there are transactions not in ordinary course of business and these transactions may be structured, might have been structured as undisclosed related party transactions, you need to take notice. So auditors and the audit committees, auditors will still probably want to come up with a disclaimer statement. And therefore, the audit committee is the one which actually gets to nail them, to sort of engage with them, that if you as transaction auditors, you come across transactions which do not seem to be in ordinary course of business, and these transactions therefore may be passing on some benefit to related parties, please do bring the transactions to notice of audit committee, carry your own investigation, carry your own trail to see where the benefit is going. In any case, bring it to notice of audit committee. Audit committees therefore need to align more carefully. They need to be sensitized themselves that they are sitting on a grave responsibility. They need to engage with auditors, number one. And number two, they in any case, they are the ones who vet through, they are the ones who approve financial statements. If transactions happen other than in ordinary course of business, in some way, they show up in the financial statements also. There are several transactions, list of which is given in SA 550, ISA 550, AICPA similar statement, which are pure examples of transactions which may be lacking the ordinary course of business test. And these transactions may eventually be giving a benefit to some related party. For example, the company suddenly gave a loan to a loan was given. Company is not in lending business. It suddenly gave a loan to someone and the loan is sitting there for a couple of years. No security, no servicing of the loan. Still the company keeps on fitting the loan. The company suddenly gave a guarantee. The company suddenly gave a counter guarantee. The company gave some advance with no perceptible purpose. These transactions are there in financial statements of just about every entity one can think of. And this is where the audit committee needs to sit to see the smoke signals. The smoke may be indicating there is a fire. So if you see smoke, test whether there is a fire as well. If you see signals of uncommercial transactions, check whether these transactions may actually be concealing a related party transaction. So I would say sensitization of the RPs, wake up call for the audit committees, and the audit committees in turn wake up, and the auditors are well awake. The audit committee just has to kind of make them responsible that no more the disclaimer, I'm not going to take your disclaimer easily, where you say that I relied on management list. Every management knows that there is a list of RPs which is not featuring in the list of RPs. So please, the auditors who are transaction auditors need to check this out. Now, question is, we are compliance, we are company secretaries or compliance people. Where do we come in picture? What's my role? See, the compliance department is the one which is orchestrating this entire show, sensitizing the audit committee, sensitizing the RPs, sensitizing the auditors. The compliance person, therefore, is the one who is sort of master of ceremony, master of the entire ceremony. So he owns the responsibility to the extent that he needs to carry forward the intent of the change regulation. So that's the responsibility of the compliance department. Question that still remains is, how does anyone test the innumerable transactions which anyway happen in every company to see if a benefit is going to an unrelated party? So I'm very clear that no one ever can possibly do it. No one ever possibly needs to check the infinite set of transactions done with unrelated parties. That's never intended. No one can even be thinking that there's a need to check every transaction done by every company. No, we don't need to check that. What we need to be therefore sensing, what we need to be therefore censoring are transactions which are not in ordinary course of business. And like I mentioned, if sensitization is done, half the purpose of regulation is achieved by sensitization. Why? Because people don't, very often people don't even intend to breach a law with the intent of breaching. People don't intend. They end up breaching the law without intent. They end up breaching the law because they're not aware of the law. That's part one. Part two, if properly sensitized of the consequences, fraud, corporate fraud, what implications might it have? Section 447, it might probably mean a reputational loss for all time to come. So if someone is sensitized with the seriousness of the implications, quite surely, quite expectedly, the RPs who typically are engaging in these maneuvers, they would probably get deterred from thinking of such maneuvering devices. That's the second way to implement. Third, I would anyway say, as transactions anyway come, transactions not in ordinary course of business come to notice, while approving financial statements, you need to be pointedly looking at those transactions. I would also say, and that's what we said as a part of our workshop, and we say it in the part of FAQs as well, it might make good sense to ask for a confirmation from related parties that they've not been responsible, they've not been involved, they're not aware of transactions which were structured to pass on undisclosed benefit to them. That's almost a part of the corporate ethics. It's almost like a code of conduct or corporate ethics, which everyone signs anyway. And this may well be made a part of the ethical statement also. But getting a separate confirmation from related parties, maybe once in a year, that might help audit committees to more seriously monitor any such transactions which conceal a benefit. To my mind, this change is not perfunctory. This change was done in UK in 2019. It's been there for 3 years or so. I have seen the guidance to audit committees from even Singapore regulators. And they were talked about audit committees may even go to ask for the trading partners or the entities who regularly do business with related parties to see if these are the parties with whom the company does business. So there may be, if we talk about properly getting sensitized, properly getting agile on the added burden that we have on head, not just be figureheads of corporate governance, but carry corporate governance to its truest spirit, so that conflicts of interest do not affect the working of company by active concealment of not just transactions, but even relationships. Very often, it's not merely structuring of transactions. It's very more often than not structuring of relationships. The relationships are so cleverly, ingeniously structured that they evade the definition of related party. So it's not merely the transaction where the focus needs to be. The focus has to be on relationships as well, such that if at the end of the network or cobweb of relationships, which are anyway not featuring in list of related parties, there is a related party sitting on top of that, actually getting the benefit through a network of what seems to be unrelated party, even that may be hit by the so-called purpose and effect test. So to my mind, it's a very significant change, and I hope with a little, not little, but more than a little sensitization, more than a little seriousness, we would be able to achieve the purpose and let corporate governance achieve or let corporate governance be what it is expected to be. Thank you very much. Do watch our videos more often. Please do join our channel, number one. Number two, please see our PPT, which is far more detailed than what I've mentioned here. And number three, see our FAQs on this very purpose and effect test. All of the links would be probably a part of our description box. And if you think that you have a question, you can probably add your question on our list of FAQs. If you think the question ought to be answered, deserves to be answered, we will be more than happy to answer your question as well. With all this, happy governing, happy implementing the change. Thank you very much.